Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, Tulsa's source for great gardens, southwoodgardencenter.com. And the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing. Welcome to Oklahoma Gardening. On today's show, host Casey Hentges has tips on how to get the most out of your bedding plant purchases. OSU Extension Associate Joshua Campbell takes us through the process of a home irrigation audit. We look at alternatives to Callery Pears, and we take care of all that wild onion and garlic that's popped up in your lawn.
It's that time of year to start heading to the nursery to buy our bedding plants, and it's easy to get overwhelmed by all the array of color that is offered at the nurseries. But before we start looking at the flowers and the colors, there's a few things I want you to consider when buying your bedding plants. Most bedding plants need just either potting soil or regular soil to grow in. But the first thing that you want to consider is where you're going to be planting these plants when you get home. What sort of environment do you have to offer these plants? Are you looking for something for full sun, maybe in full shade? Are you looking for something in a rock garden or a container? Think about those things and what you can offer the plant, what sort of environment you're asking that plant to grow in. The next thing you want to consider is what you're asking of the plant. Do you want something that's trelling, such as this tangerine vine here? Perhaps you want a lower growing ground cover, such as this gold dust with these lovely yellow flowers. Once you decide what it is, what features you're asking of the plant and looking for in the plant, you can also think about the color that you're wanting to get. And you've narrowed it down to the specific plant. It's time to start picking that plant up off the bench. So often when we pick a plant up off the bench, they're grouped together and they look good in mass, and you go to pick the one that you think is the best, and it turns out to be a little bit smaller. There's a few things to consider when you're buying that and picking that plant. You can see here we have a deep purple salvia. This plant is really a nice plant. You might notice that all of the vegetation is growing towards one side, and that's probably because where it was placed in the greenhouse, the sun exposure was on one side of it. It might have been near the edge of a bench. It might have had more plants pushed up against it, and so that caused it to grow in one direction. This isn't too much of a concern because once you put it out in the garden, it's going to fill out and look nice. Now, obviously, this one is pretty small. You can see it's been overwatered. There's some mold growing on the leaves and things like that. So this is one that you would want to avoid. Here we have another plant, this verbena. You can just see that there's not any new growth coming on this plant. It's kind of past its prime. All of the flowers are starting to fade on here. The leaves have some discoloration and they're much smaller and stunted looking. So we know that something has happened previously and it's not really in good health right now. Now here's another plant, this geranium. It looks pretty good, and I tend to focus on the new growth. The new growth is coming on strong. However, again, it has some discolored leaves down below. So that might be something that you just want to avoid if you can. Again, typically a good plant, but if you can avoid some of these leaves, do that. Here's another plant, and at first glance it might look good, but taking a closer look at the leaves, you'll see that there's some holes in those leaves. And that's because there's grasshopper damage. And in fact, we can see we have small grasshoppers that are still on this plant. Now, Again, a grasshopper is going to jump away. It's not a major threat. We already have them out in our garden likely. But why buy a plant that already has damage on it if you can avoid it? Now, knowing your plant is important because here you might think something is going on with these leaves because they obviously kind of range in color, but this is actually how the plant is supposed to look. This is Copperleaf and the cultivar is called Inferno, and it can range from kind of this yellow to red to almost a purple burgundy on the leaf. So this is how the plant is supposed to look. So you might look at the mass of plant and see what maybe is standing out. All of these plants have this range of color to them, so you know that's kind of typical on this plant. Again, when you're buying a plant, you might find that it's lopsided. So here we have a blue daze. It tends to grow more towards the left side of the pot. This plant would be a good spiller in a container because you can see how the foliage kind of drops over the edge of the pot. If you're worried about the fact that this side of the plant isn't growing, again, given enough room on the proper spacing, it will fill out nicely. It's just that real estate in a greenhouse is pretty expensive, so sometimes these plants are a little bit closer than they need to be out in the landscape. After you've looked at the upper growth of a plant, you want to look at what's going on underneath the plant, and you want to do this carefully. So this plant, you can see it's got a lot of new growth. This is a cleome. We've got some buds coming on. It looks pretty good. So we're going to go ahead, we put our fingers between the stems and gently turn it over and give the pot a tap. Now if it's got a good amount of roots, and you don't need to necessarily pull the pot completely off, but you can see it's got a fair amount of white roots. Those are healthy roots. There is a little bit of circling going on with the roots, so if we were to take this plant home, we would want to tease those roots a little bit to separate them. But this has got a good root system to it. A plant that obviously is suffering, such as this one here, it might have just been potted up into this because it's a fairly small plant for this pot. You can see we don't see any roots. So we really don't know what's going on with this plant. Perhaps it's died back, perhaps it's been overwatered too much and the roots haven't grown well. But just know that if you're to buy a smaller plant and you don't see any roots underneath that plant, then the odds are that it might just have been potted up into that larger pot, but you're buying more potting soil than you are actually a plant. Here's a little lemon drop basil. Again, we're going to kind of tip this over and see. And you want to be careful because you don't want to mess up people's plants, but you can see that the soil is coming out, so we know that it's not rooted very well in that pot. Here's another one that I'll show you. It's rooted fairly decently. It could grow some more. There's no circling or anything, but this is a good plant and some good healthy roots growing there. After you've looked at the upper part of the plant and taken a peek at what's going on in the pot, then it's time to go back and look at those flowers. A lot of times, if I know a plant is the color that it's said to be, then I go ahead and buy a plant that's not in bloom. Just buying one with buds allows you to take that home and have a little bit more flower power in your own landscape. Now, if you're concerned that you might buy a plant and it might not be the true color that it says it is, you know, sometimes I've bought a clematis and it tends to be a different color than what they said it was. You might want to make sure to buy one that has a flower on it so you can ensure that you're getting the exact color that you want. So once you've determined where you're going to plant in your garden and what you're looking for in a plant when you get to the nursery, make sure to inspect both the top and the bottom for the health. This will give you the best purchase of bedding plants. We are here today talking with Dr. Dwayne Elmore, who's with the Natural Resources, Ecology, and Management Department here at OSU. He's an extension specialist, and we want to talk today about the Callery pears. We all know they're a little bit invasive, but there's other things that you might be seeing out in the wildlife. Dr. Elmore, so behind us is a Callery pear.
Yes.
It is blooming, you can see, and it's starting to pass. Let's talk a little bit about the characteristics of Callery pear versus some of the others.
Okay, so it's been planted widely across the state in the eastern U.S. It has really nice, showy early spring blooms and upright and rapid growth, and so it's a nice shade tree. But it has a lot of undesirable characteristics, as people have found out. It's really prone to break during ice and windstorms. It is a real problem in suburban and urban areas because of grackles and starlings that like to roost in it.
It's got a dense branching
Very
structure.
dense, yeah. And then probably the most problematic feature is that it's invasive. So it doesn't stay put. It tends to move into open prairies and even into forests and completely change the plant composition. And it's becoming a huge problem in Oklahoma. It's already a major problem in Arkansas and Tennessee and parts east of here. So it's a plant we can do something about before it becomes more problematic.
Because it's not just it's taken over fields, but it actually changes the ecology in those fields, right?
Yeah, I mean, we hear a lot about eastern red cedar, you know, invading prairies and turning them into woodlands, but the same thing's happening with Bradford pear, except this plant's not even native. Whereas eastern red cedar, at least you can burn them or cut them, but this plant resprouts, so it's even more difficult to get rid of once it's established.
And so that's something, one of the features you'll often see is these almost become thickets, large thickets of Callery pear.
Correct.
So what are some of the other white flowering spring trees that we might be seeing that aren't Callery pear? We'd want to define those.
So a lot of the native plums bloom at the same time, and some of the more common ones that people will encounter are sand plum, which tends to stay small and form thickets. American plum, which is a single stem and grows in forest edges or sometimes even in open forest. And then Mexican plum, which will grow on forest edges but mostly out in the open. They all bloom at a similar time, but they're easily distinguishable. The sand plum tends to form thickets, and it has a coarse leaf surface. All those plums have coarse leaf surfaces, so that's one of the easiest ways to identify it. The Bradford or Callery pears have smooth, glossy leaves once they leaf out.
And a very oval shaped leaf too.
Yeah, and the growth form is different. The Bradfords tend to form more of a conical or kind of a pyramid shape once they get large, whereas the plums tend to sprawl and have a more kind of, you know, outward growing shape.
Okay. Yeah, I always think Bradfords look like lollipops, and the Mexican plums tend to have more of a horizontal branching structure to them.
And those are really desirable plants to have and good alternatives that are commercially available.
Okay, and so the flower on Bradfords is always white, correct? Now on the plums, can that flower color vary a little bit?
It can be more pinkish, but it from a distance it's probably going to look white. You know, it would look quite similar. And I think that's one of the reasons that the Callery pears have kind of went unnoticed in a lot of places, because people are used to seeing plums bloom in March.
Right.
And so they're just assuming, oh, those are all plums. But if you get a closer look, you realize, no, that doesn't belong here.
Okay. And of course, we can always enjoy the sand plum jelly and that sort of stuff. And the Mexican plums as well? Yeah,
the American plum, in my opinion, has the most palatable fruit.
Okay.
The sand plum would probably be second, and the Mexican plum tends to be a little drier.
Okay.
But it is palatable. You can use it for jellies and jams. It's just not quite as moist and sweet as some of the other plums.
And could these work in a homeowner situation too, if they're looking to get rid of their Bradford pear, or what are some other options that maybe homeowners should consider?
Yeah, besides our native plums, red bud is a good alternative. Of course, it looks completely different, but it also is an early spring bloomer.
And there are white buds, so if you're looking for the white flower of a Bradford.
Yeah, and red buds grow fast, whereas plums do not. Plums are slow growing, so if you want something that's like a Callery in that it grows very fast, a red bud would be a good choice. And they can tolerate full sun. They do best in partial sun. And another one is Carolina buckthorn, especially if you're in eastern Oklahoma. And it's a beautiful ornamental. It's a native plant, and it's also commercially available.
All right. So just because we see a white tree out there blooming doesn't mean that it's a Callery pear. It could be one of our natives, but we got to be sure to distinguish before we take them down.
Correct.
Thank you for joining us, Dr. Elmore.
Thank you.
Joining us today is Dr. Justin Moss, the Extension Turfgrass Specialist. And Dr. Moss, we're going to talk about weeds in our lawn. Now, I want to preface this that sometimes people do like weeds in their lawn, henbit, dandelions, because they can be very pleasing to the eye also.
Not only that, attraction to pollinators, bees, things like that.
Right.
So yeah, just leave it be.
So if you want to leave it be, that's perfectly okay. But some people do prefer the more manicured look. And today we're looking at two specific weeds in particular, the wild onions and the wild garlic. Can you help us differentiate those and identify those?
Sure. So wild onion, wild garlic, very prolific in Oklahoma in the fall and spring, and we really notice them a lot in the springtime. As you know, spring is in the air, things are starting to green up, and these things pop out of the ground. They kind of look like a grass or something out there. You're not sure what it is.
Yeah, little tufts of grass.
Yeah.
So this is one that we were talking about. Is this onion or garlic?
So this one actually is wild garlic, and one easy way to tell is just to take a leaf of it and break it off and look at it, and you can see it's kind of hollow looking in there. Mm-hmm. So. And we probably need a magnifying glass for this small one here, but if you were to look at that, it's actually hollow inside.
And they both have a pretty pungent smell to them. So
pretty pungent.
If you were to mow this, you're going to have that
you can
smell.
smell it. It smells great.
Yeah.
and if we were to dig this up and take a look at it, there's a bulb underground. And so it's a really easy way to identify it is just, okay, I look at the leaf, it's a hollow leaf, and I pull it up, dig it up, and there's bulbs. That's going to be wild garlic.
Okay, so this is wild garlic.
Yep.
What is wild onion?
Wild onion, easily confused with wild garlic. And maybe a lot of people thought that what we're looking at, they call it wild onion, but actually that's wild garlic. And so over here actually is some wild onion. And what's neat about it is its leaf is a little bit more grass-like. And so you can take it, and it's a more flattened leaf where the garlic is more rounded. And if I were to break this one, it's not hollow. It's really flat and full. No holes inside of there. But very similar, if I dig this up, I've got a bulb in there. It looks, you know, if I'm just looking at the bulb part, the underground part, they almost look identical. And really it's these leaves which can really tell the story. So
they spread by bulbs. Are those controlled as well as some of your other weeds with pre-emergence?
Those bulbs are pretty tough, and so if they are there in the soil and you put down pre-emergent herbicides on your lawn, these things are pretty tough where they're probably going to survive and come right on up in the springtime or the fall even. And so not really effective with pre-emergence, but we can, if we want to get rid of them.
Okay.
We have a couple options. One, we have some herbicide options, and so we can actually spray the yard if we want to. What we have to be careful about is usually we have Bermuda grass here in Oklahoma, Bermuda grass lawns, and they're dormant in the early spring, and then as it starts to warm up, the soil temperature goes up, they start to green up, and eventually turn all the way green, right? And so there's things that are safe to spray when it's brown Bermuda, things that are safe to spray when it's all the way green Bermuda, but that transition period's a little tricky.
And you never know exactly when that transition's going to happen.
That's right. And so it's just kind of going around scouting. If you see any green Bermuda, and maybe you got some brown Bermuda, but some green mixed in, you can apply like a glyphosate or Roundup type product that will take out wild onion and wild garlic. But if there's green Bermuda, it will also take out green Bermuda.
Okay.
So you got to be careful there.
Right. So what do we do if we've already got our Bermuda grass that's greened up for the season? Is there a way to treat it, or is that too late?
Yeah, there's a couple of herbicide options. One is a Mazaquin or Image, which is like a nut sedge type killer, I guess you would say.
Okay.
And it's safe to spray on Bermuda lawns, and it also has activity against wild onion and wild garlic.
Okay.
But again, either you have to spray it when the Bermuda is completely dormant or completely greened up and healthy. That transition period, be careful. And then we've got broadleaf weed killers like 3-way products that contain 2,4-D dicamba MCPP. Those products you can use it when the Bermuda is dormant or all the way green.
So you just want to be leery of that transition period because it's new Bermuda.
And that's what makes this one tough, is because we're always, when this one's up and you notice it, like we see it, it's usually in that transition time. And so
Okay.
that's when it's a little scary. So maybe instead of herbicides, maybe we do something else.
Okay, well, so these are a cool season. So first
These
of
are
all,
cool season,
we
yeah.
only have to worry about these in the spring and
All
in the
in
fall.
spring, that's it.
Okay, so if we don't want to treat them because they are in that transition period, we're worried about our
Yeah.
Bermuda grass, what's another option that we could do with these?
Well, we could come in and mow them down, but they're going to keep growing. It's not actually going to kill them, but it keeps them from going to seed.
Okay.
But even better than that is we can actually take these wild onions and dig them up, cook them up, and eat them. How about that?
Why not? I say we grab some and make a lunch out of it.
Hey, or breakfast, mix it with eggs is very popular. So wild onions and eggs, it's a great dish. A lot of our Native American friends, my heritage is Native American, it's pretty popular at this time of year, springtime, to have wild onion cookouts and things like that. Where, yeah, just go gather a lot, cook them up, and everybody's happy.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing with us, Dr. Moss.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Hi, my name is Joshua Campbell. I'm an Extension Associate for the Department of Horticulture and Landscape Architecture at Oklahoma State University. I work mostly in central Oklahoma in the area of water conservation. So I work with the City of Oklahoma City and other municipalities to educate citizens about the importance of water conservation in their home landscapes. One of the programs that we've developed here in Oklahoma County is the Simple Irrigation Checkup program run by Master Gardener volunteers. We're piloting the program here this year with the hopes of having a full-fledged program and service that we offer to homeowners of Oklahoma County. With the Irrigation Checkup program, what we do is we start by asking the homeowner to show us where their irrigation controller is. We go to the irrigation controller and we're able to look at the set program and watering schedules that they have and really get an idea of the length of time that they're watering and whether they're watering on the right odd or even day of the week based on their municipality's regulations. We're also able to get an idea of any changes that could be made to the watering schedule to help the homeowner be more efficient with the length of time and the way that they're watering their landscape. From there, we run through each zone on the irrigation system, starting with zone 1, and we walk through the landscape, visually inspecting the system, looking for any problems such as broken heads or maybe nozzles that are cracked or out of adjustment that can be adjusted. And so we just simply walk through the landscape, and then when we notice a problem, we'll flag it and we'll take note of that on our clipboard. And at the end of the checkup, after we walk through each zone, we'll actually meet with the homeowner and we'll discuss with them all of the issues and the things that we found in their landscape that could be fixed or repaired to lead to more efficient water use. This program is available to all residents of Oklahoma County who own a home with an automatic irrigation system. So we're not building irrigation systems, we're not even actually making the repairs on irrigation systems, but what we're doing is helping provide a simple visual inspection for the homeowner so that they have a checklist of repairs that can be made. There are many reasons that a homeowner might consider choosing a simple irrigation checkup for their home landscape. One of the first reasons is that by identifying some of these common issues and problems that go on with irrigation systems, you can save yourself money on your monthly water bill. Homeowners are often surprised by the problems that we find because their irrigation systems are running in the middle of the night or early in the morning when they're not able to see. Landscapes can be negatively affected by too much water, and so by adjusting the amount of time you're watering your landscape or the amount of days that you're watering your landscape can actually lead to a healthier and more beautiful and vibrant landscape. For more information about this program and the services that we offer, you can go to the Oklahoma County Cooperative Extension website. You can also go to squeezeeverydrop.com and find more information about water conservation programs and initiatives here in central Oklahoma. And if you'd like to do this checkup at home on your own home landscape by yourself, we actually have a fact sheet. It's called the Simple Irrigation Checkup for Home Sprinkler Systems, and it's fact sheet number HLA 6615. It'll walk you through how to do this checkup at home by yourself, and you can actually use the same program and the same steps that we do as a service to homeowners there at your own home site yourself.
There are lots of great horticultural events this time of year. Be sure and consider these activities when you're making your plans for the weeks ahead. Next week, we travel to Prairie Wind Nursery in Norman, Oklahoma to look at some great tough plants. Host Casey Hentges shifts a stack of cinder blocks to build a raised bed in our concepts garden. And we pinch, deadhead, and disbud to get the most out of our grateful bedding plants. So join us then for more TV you'll grow to love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We wish to thank our generous underwriters, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Green Lake Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society.